The night Rowan Ellis signed her divorce papers, New York felt colder than ever. Not the kind of cold that lives in the wind, but the kind that settles inside your bones when you realize the person you trusted has already replaced you. She walked out of the courthouse alone, clutching nothing but a thin folder and her grandmother's old ring tucked into her coat pocket. Preston Ward didn't even glance back. He simply straightened his designer tie, brushed Lila Monroe's arm, and stepped into the waiting black Mercedes like he had just upgraded his entire life. Rowan didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't ask for anything, not the apartment, not the car, not the savings. Preston drained behind her back. Silence was the only dignity she had left, and she held on to it like a lifeline. But silence can be dangerous, especially when the person you underestimated most has nothing left to lose. That night, Rowan went back to her tiny sublet, sat on the floor beside an unpacked suitcase, and slipped on the ring Preston once mocked. "It's outdated," he'd sneered. "No real value. Someday, I'll buy you a real diamond." But under the dim lamp, the old Cartier stone shimmered with a quiet defiance, one Rowan never knew she possessed. Across the city, Preston toasted champagne with investors, bragging about how cutting dead weight makes a man unstoppable. Leela laughed too loudly. Flashbulbs sparkled. And somewhere between arrogance and ambition, Preston made the single mistake that would destroy everything he built. He didn't know Rowan had received an unexpected email that same night. A personal invitation to the Waldorf Astoria Winter Gala, the very gala Preston had spent 5 years trying to get into. And he definitely didn't know that when Rowan walked through those golden doors, she would be wearing the ring he couldn't afford, and the truth he could never outrun. Asterisk, asterisk. But what she didn't know yet was that someone powerful was waiting for her too. Someone who would change everything. Someone Preston feared far more than the truth. Rowan Ellis woke up the next morning to a silence so heavy it felt personal. Her sublet apartment, barely large enough to fit a twin mattress and a second-hand dresser, looked nothing like the home she once shared with Preston. The man had stripped more than furniture from her life. He had taken warmth, stability, and the illusion that loyalty meant something. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the email again, the invitation to the Waldorf Astoria Winter Gala. It wasn't a mistake. Her nonprofit had been selected for recognition, and she was expected to attend as the program coordinator. Usually, Preston would have accepted the invitation on her behalf, claiming the spotlight while Rowan did the groundwork. Now, ironically, the seat belonged entirely to her. Rowan brushed a hand through her hair, still tangled from sleep, and let out a humorless breath. "Why me? And why now?" she whispered into the empty room. "Because life has a wicked sense of timing." Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "If you decide to attend the gala, come prepared. And wear the ring. E. See?" She frowned. E. See? She checked her work contacts, scroll after scroll, until a single name made her pause. Ellington Cross. CEO of Crosswell Global. One of the wealthiest, most intimidating names in Manhattan, and a major donor to her organization. She'd only met him twice. Both times, he had spoken to her the way people rarely did, as if her thoughts mattered. Why would he text her? Why tell her to wear the ring? He couldn't possibly know its value, could he? Rowan set the phone down, heart drumming. She looked around the tiny room again. Bills piled on the counter, a nearly empty fridge, a stack of job rejections, shadows of a life that seemed to be shrinking. But the ring felt like the only thing she hadn't lost. Cartier. Vintage. A design no longer produced. A relic Preston dismissed without looking twice. Rowan slipped it onto her finger. The metal was cool, steadying like someone placing a hand on her spine and telling her to stand up straight. Maybe she would go to the gala. Maybe she would walk into the same world Preston worshipped without him. Maybe silence wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strategy. For the first time in months, Rowan felt something she thought she had lost forever. Possibility. She didn't know it yet, but the night of the gala would change every rule and expose every lie. Rowan set the ring on the small kitchen table, the only piece of furniture in the apartment that didn't wobble. Morning light filtered through the cracked blinds, catching the Cartier stone and scattering faint reflections across the room. It looked almost out of place in her life now, too elegant, too storied, too full of a past she barely understood. Her grandmother, Eleanor Ellis, had worn it every Sunday, always brushing her fingers over it, as if remembering something sacred. "It's not the value that matters," she used to say. "It's the history." Rowan never thought to ask more. She was too young when Eleanor passed, and the ring became a quiet heirloom tucked away in a jewelry pouch. Until today. She opened her laptop, typing "vintage Cartier ring identification" into the search bar. Dozens of images appeared, but none matched hers exactly. Curious, she switched to auction sites, and then she froze. There it was. Not identical, but close part of a discontinued series known for its rarity. Estimated value, $180,000. Her breath left her in a shaky exhale. Preston had mocked it, called it a sentimental trinket, said one day he'd buy her a diamond worthy of a real wife. Meanwhile, the ring he dismissed could have bought their entire apartment, his precious suits, maybe even the first payment on the Mercedes he flaunted. A bitter laugh slipped out before she could stop it. Rowan clicked deeper into the listings. One article mentioned collectors, private buyers, even museums seeking pieces from the lost Cartier series. Names scrolled across the page, some she recognized from the philanthropy world, and one stood out, Ellington Cross. He hadn't just randomly texted her. He knew. A knock at her door startled her. It was her landlord, reminding her rent was due in 4 days. Rowan nodded, promising she'd transfer something soon, though they both knew the money wasn't there. When the door shut, she stared at the ring again. Could it really change her circumstances? Sell it? Pawn it? Trade it? No. Something told her the ring's value went far beyond money. Something tied to Eleanor, and maybe to the Cross family. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "The gala will be a turning point. Wear the ring, Miss Ellis. You'll understand soon. E.C." Rowan swallowed hard. For the first time, she wondered whether the ring wasn't just a family keepsake, but the key to a secret Preston could never have imagined. Preston Ward admired his reflection in the elevator mirror, adjusting the lapels of his charcoal suit as if he were preparing to receive an award. The man loved his own image almost as much as he loved stepping on anyone he thought was beneath him. Beside him, Lila Monroe snapped a selfie, angling her face to catch the gleam of the faux diamond bracelet Preston had bought her. "You sure your ex won't show?" she asked, applying lip gloss without looking away from her phone. Preston scoffed. "Rowan, please. She can't afford the parking fee outside the Waldorf, let alone a ticket to the winter gala." His smirk widened. "Tonight is about us. About how far I've come." Lila clicked her tongue, looping her arm around his as they stepped into the marble lobby of his firm. "Good. Because I want everyone to see who you upgraded to." He liked that. He liked the validation, the attention, the illusion of power. And tonight, he intended to flaunt it all. The gala was full of investors, socialites, and connections he'd been chasing for years. Lila was flashy enough to get noticed, compliant enough to be molded, and ambitious enough to play along. But the truth he didn't want to admit, not even to himself, was that Rowan's absence wasn't guaranteed. She worked for a nonprofit that often collaborated with the gala's hosts. He'd prayed she wouldn't attend, but Preston refused to let the anxiety show. Lila tugged at his sleeve. "What if she's there?" He didn't hesitate. "If she shows up, it only makes us look better. She'll blend into the carpet, and people will wonder how I ever settled for someone so plain." Lila grinned, satisfied. But then she leaned closer. "I should warn you. I saw something on social media. Someone from her organization posted a teaser about their rising star attending tonight. Think it could be her?" Preston stiffened. "No," he said firmly, though the lie tightened his throat. "Even if she comes, she'll be invisible. Trust me." Yet Lila wasn't done. She held up her phone, scrolling to a gossip page. "Funny thing, someone snapped her, leaving the courthouse yesterday." She zoomed in. "They're calling it the silent divorce. People feel sorry for her. That could get attention." Preston's jaw clenched. Compassion for Rowan was the last thing he needed tonight. Still, he forced a smile and kissed Lila's temple. "Let them talk. I'm the one who walked away a winner." But for the first time, doubt flickered in his chest. Because deep down, Preston feared one thing above all. If Rowan showed up, she might shine in ways he never let her before. The Waldorf Astoria glowed like a palace carved out of winter light. Manhattan's December air was sharp, glittering, electric, exactly the atmosphere the city's elite adored. Tonight, the lobby teemed with men in tailored tuxedos, women in gowns that shimmered like constellations, and the low hum of whispered deals disguised as polite conversation. Every corner smelled of white orchids, champagne, and money. Photographers lined the velvet ropes outside, shouting names of hedge fund heirs, tech magnates, and European aristocrats flown in for the night. Flashbulbs erupted with every powerful step taken across the marble floors. And in the middle of everything, Preston Ward felt like he was finally breathing the same air as the people he desperately wanted to become. He straightened his cufflinks, tugged Lila Monroe closer, and grinned as the cameras snapped not at him, but close enough that he could pretend they were. Lila posed shamelessly, tossing her hair back, angling her bracelet to catch the light. "This is it," Preston murmured. "Our night." He meant his night. A night to cement his narrative, the successful man who shed a quiet, forgettable wife and stepped into the glittering future he deserved. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The orchestra rehearsed on stage, tuning violins that echoed against gold-leafed walls. Servers carried trays of champagne flutes, each glass catching reflections of the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Preston inhaled deeply, his ego expanding with every luxurious detail. He was finally here, yet something or someone gnawed at the back of his mind. Rowan. He forced the thought away. She wouldn't dare show up. Not in her thrift store dresses, not with her shy posture, not with her inability to blend into these circles. She'd crumble under the attention. But as he and Lila approached the check-in table, Preston noticed the event director flipping through her list with exaggerated politeness. "Name?" she asked. "Preston Ward. +1. She scanned the list, smiled tightly, and handed him 2 badges. But then she paused. "Oh, Mr. Ward," she added casually, "your ex-wife has already checked in." Preston's stomach flipped. Lila's smile evaporated. "She's here?" The director nodded. "Arrived about 10 minutes ago. Lovely woman. Stunning ring." Preston felt the blood drain from his face. "Ring? What ring?" He swallowed hard, suddenly dizzy beneath the glow of the chandeliers. If Rowan was here, if she looked different, if she dared to stand tall, then tonight might not belong to him at all. Rowan Ellis stood in front of the cracked mirror of her tiny sublet, clutching the only evening gown she owned, a simple black dress she had purchased years ago on clearance for a work dinner. Preston ultimately forbade her from attending. "You'll embarrass me," he'd said then. "Leave the events to people who belong there." The memory stung, but tonight, strangely, it didn't break her. Instead, it pushed her forward. She slipped into the dress. It hugged her gently, not glamorously, but gracefully. The fabric wasn't designer, but in the dim glow of her lamp, it looked quietly elegant, almost defiant. She brushed her hair into soft waves, applied minimal makeup, and stepped back. She didn't look like Preston's discarded wife. She looked like someone rebuilding, but something was missing. Her eyes drifted to the velvet pouch, resting atop a stack of unpaid bills. The Cartier ring. The one Preston sneered at. The one her grandmother cherished like a secret. Rowan hesitated. The ring felt too bold, too noticeable. The gala crowd swarmed with people who could identify a valuable piece from across the room. What if someone asked about it? What if questions exposed how little she knew about its history? What if Preston saw? What if wearing it made her look desperate? But then another thought surfaced. Wear the ring. You'll understand soon. C. Ellington Cross was not a man who wasted words. If he said to wear it, there was a reason. And somehow, Rowan felt safer trusting his guidance than trusting her own doubts. She opened the pouch. The ring glimmered like a tiny captured sunrise. Not flashy, not loud, just unmistakably rare. She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if waiting for this moment. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her best friend. "Tessa, you don't have to go. No one would blame you for skipping it. You've been through enough." Rowan stared at herself in the mirror. The woman reflected back wasn't trembling. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't apologizing for existing. "I'm going," Rowan whispered. She grabbed her coat, the old wool one with the frayed hem, and stepped into the hallway. The elevator hummed as it carried her down to the street, where the cold Manhattan air kissed her cheeks. A yellow cab pulled up the moment she reached the curb, as if summoned. As if fate itself were waiting. And as she climbed in, Rowan didn't know whether the gala would lift her up or destroy her. But she had finally decided to stop running. The taxi rolled to a smooth stop beneath the glowing awning of the Waldorf Astoria, where golden light spilled across the sidewalk like a spotlight waiting for its star. Rowan Ellis stepped out slowly, tugging her frayed coat tighter around her shoulders. For a moment, she felt painfully out of place, like a scribbled note dropped into a stack of embossed invitations. But then the revolving doors opened, and warm air swept over her, carrying the scent of orchids, champagne, and polished marble. The hum of orchestra strings drifted through the grand lobby. Guests glided past her in glittering gowns and custom tuxedos, moving with the confidence of people who had never questioned their right to be seen. Rowan inhaled sharply. She didn't belong here. That's what Preston had always told her. Yet here she stood. She slipped off her coat and handed it to the attendant. Beneath it, her simple black dress softened the harsh lighting, making her look timeless instead of underdressed. But it was the ring, the Cartier stone, that stole the room's attention. Gasps fluttered nearby, whispered guesses, curious glances. Rowan felt her cheeks warm. "I shouldn't be wearing this," she murmured to herself. But then, "Miss Ellis?" She spun around. A tall woman in a shimmering silver gown smiled warmly. "You're with the Crescent Outreach Program. Yes, we've been eager to meet you. Your work with the youth shelters is extraordinary." Rowan blinked, stunned. No one had ever introduced her like that, never with pride, never with admiration. "Yes," she finally managed. "Thank you. I'm honored to be here." As the woman drifted away, Rowan caught sight of herself in a mirrored pillar. She didn't look invisible. She didn't look broken. She looked present, almost radiant. She moved deeper into the ballroom. Chandeliers glittered above her like frozen galaxies. Servers glided through with champagne flutes. People turned their heads as she passed, not because she was out of place, but because the ring on her hand gleamed under the lights like a star reclaimed. Then she felt it, a pair of eyes burning into her back. Rowan turned. Preston Ward stood across the room, frozen mid-step, his arms still looped around Lila's. His expression wasn't shock, it was something sharper, something unsettled. Lila followed his gaze and gasped. "Is that Rowan? What is she wearing? And what is that ring?" Preston didn't answer. Because, for the first time in his life, Rowan looked like someone he couldn't control. Preston Ward could handle many things: competition, criticism, even scandal. But what he could never handle was losing control of a narrative he believed he owned. And in that moment, as he watched Rowan glide through the ballroom like someone reborn, control slipped through his fingers like sand. Lila Monroe tugged his arm. "Babe, why is everyone looking at her? She's wearing the same dress code as the waitstaff. And what's with that ring? It looks expensive." Preston swallowed hard. "It's fake. Has to be." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying to himself. Rows of chandeliers caught the Cartier stone on Rowan's hand, sending sparks of reflected light across the ballroom. Each glint drew another pair of curious eyes. Investors murmured. Socialites whispered. A well-known collector even leaned forward for a better look. "She's making a spectacle of herself," Preston muttered. "No," Lila corrected sharply. "They're making a spectacle of her. Why are people impressed by her? This was supposed to be our night." Preston didn't respond. His throat tightened as he watched Rowan exchange a polite greeting with a board member from Crosswell Global. His world had flipped. The woman he dismissed as forgettable was now attracting the kind of attention he once begged for. Lila narrowed her eyes. "Should we go say hi?" Preston's pulse jumped. The last thing he wanted was to confront Rowan in front of half Manhattan. But doing nothing felt worse. "Fine," he said, forcing a smirk. "Let's remind her who she lost." As they approached, the murmur of the crowd shifted. A tall man in a black tux, polished, effortless, unmistakably powerful, stepped into Rowan's circle. Ellington Cross. Of course, he was here. Of course, he saw her first. "Good evening, Miss Ellis," Ellington said, his voice warm yet commanding. "You look remarkable tonight." Rowan flushed, startled but grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Cross." "Of course." Ellington's gaze fell to her hand. "And you wore it." Preston froze mid-step. "Wore what?" Ellington continued. Your grandmother had impeccable taste. That ring hasn't surfaced in public in decades. A ripple of excitement passed through the nearby guests. Rowan swallowed. You recognize it? Of course, Ellington replied. Collectors have searched for that piece for years. Leela's jaw dropped. Preston's stomach twisted. Before Preston could recover enough to speak, Ellington placed a steadying hand on Rowan's back. Walk with me? He asked her. Rowan nodded softly. As they moved away, Rowan radiant, Ellington by her side, Preston felt the ballroom tilt. For the first time ever, he wasn't the man people were looking at. Preston Ward pushed through the crowd, his pulse thundering in his ears as he watched Rowan drift farther away beside Ellington Cross. The two of them looked like they belonged together in this world of chandeliers and crystal. Rowan serene and understated, Ellington calm and commanding. It made Preston's stomach twist with a jealousy he couldn't hide. Lila followed close behind, heels clacking sharply. Why is he talking to her? And why is that ring such a big deal? Preston, what's happening? Nothing, he snapped, though panic spread through his voice. Ellington talks to everyone. But Rowan wasn't everyone. Hell of one. The ring wasn't nothing. And Preston knew it. He finally caught up to them as Ellington guided Rowan toward a quieter alcove near the orchestra pit. Rowan, Preston said, plastering on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't expect to see you here. His gaze flicked to the ring, greed flashing for a moment before he concealed it. Rowan straightened, her heartbeat loud but steady. I was invited. Lila looped her arm tighter around Preston's. What a coincidence, she said with a sugary smirk. Small world, isn't it? Ellington's expression cooled instantly. Miss Ellis is here because of her professional achievements, not coincidence. The subtle correction hit Preston like a slap. He forced a laugh. Come on, Rowan. You don't know these circles. Let me walk you out before you embarrass yourself. Rowan blinked, stunned. Even now, he still believed he had authority over her. Ellington stepped in front of her before she could reply. Mr. Ward, she seems perfectly capable of carrying herself, and given the attention she's receiving tonight, I'd say she's embarrassing no one. Several nearby guests paused mid-conversation, glancing over. Whispers. Eyes narrowing. Preston's facade cracking. Attention? Preston scoffed. That ring doesn't belong to her. She doesn't even know what she's wearing. Rowan's voice remained calm. It belonged to my grandmother. Thanks for watching. And you never cared about it, Preston hissed under his breath. You don't deserve to. Stop. The single word came from Ellington, low and sharp enough to cut the tension in half. You will not speak to her that way, he said. Not here, not anywhere. A few gasps echoed nearby. Preston froze, realizing too late that people were listening, important people. Lila tugged his sleeve. Preston, they're staring. Indeed they were. Investors, board members, donors, all now whispering about the man berating his ex-wife in public. Rowan stepped back, not out of fear, but clarity. For the first time since the divorce, she wasn't the one losing control. Ellington Cross didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the air around them, the way a storm changes pressure before the first drop falls. Conversations softened, heads turned. And for the first time, Rowan realized something astonishing. Preston wasn't the powerful one in this room. Ellington was. Mr. Ward, Ellington said calmly, I believe Miss Ellis has endured enough disrespect. Preston forced a laugh, but it cracked around the edges. Come on, Cross. I was just clearing up a misunderstanding. Rowan gets overwhelmed in places like this. Rowan stiffened, but Ellington spoke before she could. She seems perfectly composed to me, he replied. Far more than I can say for you. Lila inhaled sharply. Are you insulting Preston? He's worked hard to be here. Ellington didn't even glance at her. This event doesn't reward ambition without integrity. Preston's jaw clenched. What's that supposed to mean? Ellington's gaze lowered to the Cartier ring on Rowan's hand. That piece belonged to Eleanor Ellis. She was a close acquaintance of my father, a woman of exceptional character. That ring was part of a private commission Cartier made for her in the 1,950 seconds. Only 3 exist. A ripple of awe moved through the growing crowd. Rowan felt her breath hitch. Her grandmother knew the Cross family. Ellington continued gently. Your grandmother intended the ring for a woman strong enough to wear it, I imagine she'd be pleased to see it tonight. Rowan's eyes burned not from sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in months. Pride. Preston scoffed loudly, trying to reclaim control. You're all acting like it's priceless. It's just some old jewelry. Rowan doesn't even know what she's holding. Ellington turned to him slowly. I assure you, it is priceless, and Miss Ellis understands its value better than anyone here, because she understands legacy. The word legacy carried weight, especially among the elite. Preston paled. Ellington looked back at Rowan. May I escort you to your table? There are several individuals who would very much like to meet you. Meet me? Rowan whispered. Of course. His voice softened. You belong in rooms like this far more than you were led to believe. Preston stepped forward. She's my ex-wife, Cross. Don't act like she's suddenly. Ellington cut him off, tone icy. Mr. Ward, you no longer get to define her. Lila tugged Preston's arm desperately. Stop. People are staring. Too late. Every eye was already on them. And Rowan, for the first time, wasn't the one shrinking under the attention. She was the one rising. Lila Monroe felt the shift before she fully understood it. People weren't looking at her anymore. Their gazes didn't linger on her sequined dress or her carefully curated smile. They slid right past her, drawn instead to Rowan Ellis, the woman she'd assumed was powerless. Forgotten, finished. Jealousy ignited in Lila's chest like a struck match. Preston, she hissed, gripping his arm too tightly. Why is everyone fascinated with her? She looks like she bought that dress at a thrift store. Preston yanked his arm away. Will you stop? You're making a scene. No, she snapped. She's making a scene. And who the hell is Ellington Cross to her? Why does he know her grandmother? Why is he defending her like she's royalty? Lila wasn't used to being ignored. She wasn't used to being second. But tonight, she was fading. And Rowan, the woman she dismissed as a nobody, was glowing. Determined to reclaim attention, Lila marched toward Rowan and Ellington, forcing a venomous smile. So, she began loudly, ensuring nearby guests heard. Rowan, darling, that ring of yours, is it even real? I mean, I wouldn't want the press mistaking costume jewelry for Cartier. That would be humiliating. A hush fell. A cruel smirk tugged at Lila's lips. Rowan's cheeks flushed, but before she spoke, Ellington stepped forward, his expression turning dangerously cool. Miss Monroe, he said, the only humiliating thing here is your assumption that a woman's worth comes from the brand she wears. Lila blinked. Excuse me? Ellington continued, the ring is real, historically significant, and it was entrusted to someone who carries herself with dignity, something you seem unfamiliar with. Gasps rippled through the surrounding crowd. A few people actually stepped back from Lila, as if her desperation were contagious. Her face burned. I was just asking a question. No, Ellington replied. You were attempting to demean someone to elevate yourself. That tactic doesn't work in this room. Preston finally reached her side, whispering harshly, What are you doing? Stop talking. But Lila couldn't stop, not with humiliation clawing up her throat. She's manipulating you, Lila snapped, pointing at Rowan. You don't know her like I do. She's weak. She's boring. She's... Enough. Rowan's voice cut through the tension, not loud, but firm in a way no one expected. Lila froze. Rowan met her gaze calmly. You don't have to tear me down to matter, but it won't make you matter more. The crowd murmured in approval. Eyes drifted away from Lila and toward Rowan. And in that moment, Lila realized the horrifying truth. She had accidentally destroyed her own image, and Rowan hadn't even lifted a finger. The tension in the ballroom shifted subtle, but unmistakable. Rowan Ellis felt it ripple through the crowd like a change in temperature. People no longer looked at her with pity or curiosity. Their gazes carried something far rarer. Respect. It was a quiet power, delicate but undeniable. Ellington Cross remained beside her, his posture relaxed yet protective. He spoke in a low voice that only she could hear. You handled that with grace, Miss Ellis. Rowan exhaled slowly. I didn't do anything. That, Ellington replied, lips curving slightly, is exactly why it worked. Across the room, Lila Monroe clung to Preston's arm, looking visibly shaken. Preston looked even worse, jaw tight, face pale, eyes darting around the ballroom as whispers followed him like smoke. Rowan didn't take pleasure in it, not yet. She was still adjusting to this strange new reality, a world where her silence had become strength instead of a weapon used against her. Ellington offered her a glass of champagne. "You deserve to be here. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Rowan hesitated before accepting. "I'm trying." "Try less," he said softly. "Just be." Rowan's heart fluttered with something unfamiliar confidence. She stood a little taller. That was when a cluster of donors approached, including a woman dripping in pearls and authority. "Mr. Cross," the woman greeted warmly, "and this must be Miss Ellis. We heard about your youth shelter project. Remarkable work." Rowan blinked, stunned. "Oh, thank you. It's a team effort." "Nonsense," the woman said. "We've seen the reports. Your leadership is clear." Preston had never allowed her to lead anything, not even conversations in their own home. As donors continued asking Rowan about her work, Preston hovered several steps away, unable to interrupt without humiliating himself. Lila whispered frantically in his ear, but he kept brushing her off, eyes fixed on Rowan as if she were slipping out of his grasp. She wasn't slipping away. She had already left him. When the donors finally moved on, Rowan let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Ellington's voice softened. "How does it feel?" "Strange," she admitted. "Like I'm waking up after being asleep for years." Ellington nodded. "Sometimes it only takes one moment to return to yourself." Rowan looked down at the Cartier ring glinting under the chandelier's glow and understood the truth. This wasn't about jewelry or status. It was about being seen for who she truly was. And Preston saw it too, because when their eyes met across the ballroom, his expression held something she never expected. The Waldorf Astoria Ballroom had hosted countless scandals, triumphs, and whispered betrayals over the years, yet few stories spread faster than the one forming around Rowan Ellis. It began as a soft ripple, a quiet curiosity about the woman with the rare Cartier ring, but within minutes, it evolved into something sharper, something electric. Clusters of donors, executives, and socialites leaned toward one another, their voices low but urgent. "Isn't that Preston Ward's ex-wife? She's stunning. Why did he ever leave her?" "No, the real question is, how did she get that ring?" "Ellington Cross seems very attentive, doesn't he?" The murmurs thickened, weaving themselves into a narrative Preston couldn't control. Lila noticed first. Her eyes widened as every conversation she walked past contained Rowan's name, and none contained hers. "Preston," she whispered desperately, "they're talking about her. You need to fix this. Now." But Preston could barely breathe. He heard the whispers too sharp, slicing, and humiliating. Ward traded her for a PR intern? Classic social climber move. Looks like he downgraded. Downgraded. The word stabbed him harder than he expected. He tried approaching a pair of investors he'd been courting for months, but they offered him only tight smiles before pulling away. Their eyes lingered on Rowan instead, drawn to the quiet dignity she carried and the unmistakable glow of the ring on her finger. "Mr. Ward," one investor murmured politely but coldly, "we'll revisit our conversation another time." Another time, meaning never. Rowan, unaware of the exact words being whispered, sensed the shift. People no longer glanced at her the way they used to, as though she were simply part of Preston's shadow. Tonight, she stood fully in her own light. Ellington returned to her side, offering a gentle nod. "You're navigating this beautifully." Rowan gave a small, uncertain laugh. "I'm just trying not to faint." "You're doing far more than that," he said. "You're being seen." She looked around at the faces turned toward her, the eyes filled with curiosity rather than judgment. It felt surreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life. But then she caught sight of Preston. He stood alone now, abandoned even by Lila, who sulked near the champagne tower. His jaw was clenched, his fists tight, his entire posture radiating panic. Rowan didn't gloat, she didn't smile, but something inside her settled a stone finally laid to rest. He had underestimated her. He had erased her. He had replaced her. But he had never truly known her. And tonight, the world finally did. Preston Ward couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the stares, the humiliating shift in power, each one chipped at the image he had spent years fabricating. He watched Rowan Ellis from across the ballroom, standing with poise he never allowed her to show. Every minute she remained graceful, he unraveled further. Finally, he snapped. "Rowan," he barked, louder than he intended. The music didn't stop, but conversations around him did. Heads turned. Lila, embarrassed, tried tugging his sleeve. "Not here, Preston. You're making it worse." He shook her off violently. Rowan turned slowly, her expression calm but unreadable. Ellington Cross stood beside her, posture tall and protective, a contrast to Preston's frantic energy. Preston stormed toward them, eyes wild. "We need to talk. Alone." "No," Rowan said softly but firmly. The simple refusal stunned him. She had never told him no before, not once, not even when he deserved it most. Preston forced a laugh, the sound brittle. "Rowan, don't do this. You're embarrassing yourself. You don't belong in these circles. You never did." A ripple of disapproval swept through the nearby guests. Ellington stepped forward. "Mr. Ward, I suggest you lower your voice." Preston glared. "Stay out of this, Cross. You don't know anything about our marriage." Ellington tilted his head. "I know enough. And what I don't know, I can see plainly in how you treat her." End quote. Rowan inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Preston, please leave me alone. This isn't the time." Preston leaned closer, desperation dripping from every word. "You don't get to act like this. You don't get to." His eyes flicked to the ring. "You don't deserve that. Give it to me." The room gasped. Rowan's jaw tightened. "This ring was never yours." "It should have been," he shouted. "If you just listened, if you hadn't held me back, I could have bought you something better." "I could have. You could have treated me with respect," Rowan interrupted softly. He froze. Her voice carried more weight in its gentleness than his anger ever had. Ellington placed a hand lightly at Rowan's back, not claiming, not controlling, simply supporting. The subtle gesture made Preston tremble with rage. "You think you're better than me now?" Preston spat. "You think wearing some dusty old ring makes you special?" "No," Rowan said, meeting his eyes for the first time all night. "What makes me special is that I finally know my worth." The crowd murmured, approving. Preston looked around at the judging stares, at Lila inching away from him, at investors whispering behind hands, and panic clawed at his throat. For the first time, he realized Rowan wasn't alone. He was. For a long, suspended moment, the ballroom held its breath. Preston Ward's chest heaved, rage and desperation swirling together in a way that made him look almost unrecognizable. He had spent years manipulating Rowan Ellis into silence, pushing her into shadows so he could shine brighter. But here, beneath golden chandeliers and watchful eyes, his power evaporated. "Rowan," he pleaded now, voice cracking, "please, stop this. We can fix everything. Just talk to me, please." The shift was jarring. One moment he was shouting, demanding, belittling. The next, he was begging because the audience he cared most about was watching him crumble. Rowan didn't move. She didn't falter. Her calmness seemed to undo him further. "Preston," she said softly, "there's nothing to fix." He shook his head violently. "Yes, there is. We were married for 7 years. You can't just erase that. You can't just walk around acting like you're better than me now." Rowan's voice remained gentle, almost tender but unwavering. "I'm not erasing anything. I'm accepting it." Preston choked on a breath, his face reddening. "Rowan, please. Say something, anything that gives me a chance. I can't have this be the last word." Ellington Cross watched silently, ready to intervene, but sensing this was a moment Rowan needed to claim herself. She stepped closer, not to comfort, but to close the chapter. Her eyes met Preston's, steady and clear, for the first time in years. "You already signed the divorce." The words were soft, simple, final, yet they sliced deeper than any scream. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Even Lila flinched. It wasn't the sentence itself, it was the certainty in Rowan's voice, the quiet acceptance that made it undeniable. Preston staggered back a step, breath trembling. "Rowan, don't do this. Don't walk away from me like I'm nothing." Rowan blinked slowly. "I'm not walking away from you like you're nothing. I'm walking away because I'm finally something." A weight lifted from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't realized she'd carried since the day she said, "I do." Sedated. Ellington stepped forward then, placing a steady, respectful hand at her back, not claiming her, not shielding her, but standing with her. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Preston looked between them. Rowan strong, Ellington unwavering, and understood with brutal clarity. He had lost her. Not tonight. Long ago. Tonight was merely the truth catching up. And Rowan's sentence, the one she spoke without anger, became the closing of a door he would never reopen. Rowan Ellis stepped away from Preston, each breath coming easier than the last. For years, she had carried the weight of his criticism, his control, his quiet erosion of who she used to be. But now here, in the dazzling ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, she felt something she had never felt in his presence. Lightness? Ellington Cross walked beside her, matching her pace without crowding her. The noise of the gala faded behind them as they entered a quieter corridor lined with gilded sconces and framed art. Rowan leaned lightly against a marble column, exhaling. "Are you all right?" Ellington asked, voice low, rich, grounding. She nodded slowly. "I think I am, for the first time in a very long time." Ellington studied her, not with scrutiny but with the kind of attentiveness that made her feel seen rather than evaluated. "You handled that with dignity most people never achieve." "I was C-no tonight." Rowan huffed a small laugh. "I didn't feel dignified. My hands were shaking." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he replied gently. "It's moving anyway." The words settled warmly in her chest. A server passed by with a tray of champagne. Rowan took a glass and let the bubbles brush her lip before sipping. The sparkling wine tasted expensive, crisp, and strangely symbolic, like the first moment of a life she hadn't believed she deserved. Ellington turned slightly, examining the ring on her hand. "Your grandmother would be proud tonight." Rowan swallowed. "I didn't even know the story behind it. I didn't know she knew your family." "She admired strength," Ellington said. "She saw something in you, probably long before you saw it yourself." Rowan looked down, the ring glowing under the soft light. "I always thought it was just sentimental. Something old. Something simple." "It is simple," Ellington said. "Beautiful things often are, but simplicity isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the purest form of power." Her eyes lifted to his, and for a moment, everything felt still. Then Ellington stepped back slightly, clearing his throat. "There's something else." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small ivory envelope embossed with gold. "This came for you earlier. The event director asked me to deliver it." Rowan frowned. "For me?" He nodded. She slid her finger under the seal and unfolded the thick paper. Her breath caught. It wasn't a thank you note. It wasn't a donor invitation. It was a notification from a law firm she vaguely recognized her grandmother's attorneys, regarding the execution of the remaining estate of Eleanor Ellis. "Remaining? Estate?" Rowan's pulse quickened. Ellington watched her carefully. "What is it?" Rowan clutched the letter, stunned. I think my life is about to change again." End quote. Rowan Ellis sat in the back of a town car provided by the gala organizers, the ivory envelope trembling slightly in her hands. The city lights blurred past the window, neon reflections on wet pavement, the hum of Manhattan moving at its relentless pace, yet everything inside the car felt unnervingly still. Ellington Cross sat across from her, giving her space yet remaining close enough for reassurance. "Take your time," he said softly. "Whatever it is, you're not facing it alone." Embostoration, it's Fort about 2000. Those words, "you're not facing it alone," settled over her like a warm blanket she hadn't realized she needed. Rowan unfolded the letter again, forcing herself to really read it this time. "Per the conditions of Eleanor Ellis's estate, you are now the sole inheritor of her remaining assets, including a Fifth Avenue residence and all accompanying trusts." Her breath caught. A residence? On Fifth Avenue? Her grandmother, a woman she thought had lived a modest life, had owned property in one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in the world? "That can't be right," Rowan whispered. "She never mentioned anything like this." Ellington's eyes softened. "Eleanor was an intensely private woman. My father said she disliked attention, even when she deserved it." Rowan shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "But why me? Why hide something like this? Why leave it to someone who didn't even know the truth?" "Maybe," Ellington replied gently. "She believed the right moment would find you, and that you'd understand its meaning only when you were ready." Ready? Rowan had spent years being belittled, minimized, told she wasn't enough. Now she was learning her past held more value financially, historically, emotionally than Preston ever imagined. The car turned onto Fifth Avenue, the skyline rising around them like a glittering cathedral. Rowan looked out the window at buildings she once only admired from a distance. "Your grandmother's attorneys want you to meet them tomorrow morning," Ellington said, reading the rest of the letter. They'll give you full access to the estate's details. Rowan exhaled shakily. This doesn't feel real. Truth often feels unreal at first, Ellington said, especially when you've been taught to expect so little. His words pierced something deep within her. As they approached her apartment, Ellington leaned forward slightly. Rowan, this inheritance, it doesn't define you, but it gives you choices. Freedom, safety, and that matters. Her eyes glistened. I've never had any of those. You do now. The car stopped. Rowan stepped out into the cold night air, clutching the letter. Everything ahead, estate meetings, financial revelations, a Fifth Avenue home, felt impossible. But for the first time, impossible didn't mean unreachable. It meant hers. Preston Ward arrived at his office the next morning, expecting to regain control of the narrative. He rehearsed excuses, crafted a story where he was the victim of his unstable ex-wife, and planned to charm investors back into his orbit. That illusion lasted precisely 3 minutes. Because the moment he stepped into the sleek glass lobby of Halden & Co., every conversation stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Employees stared at him, not with respect, not even neutrality, but with something far worse. Pity. A receptionist cleared her throat. Mr. Ward, the partners would like to see you immediately. Preston forced a confident smile, but inside, panic began sinking its claws. He rode the elevator up, straightening his tie, rehearsing charisma like armor. But when the doors opened, he found not a boardroom, but a firing squad. 3 senior partners, arms crossed, jaws tight. Preston, the managing partner began, we've received concerning reports from last night's gala. Reports? Preston scoffed. You mean rumors? Exaggerations? I can explain. The partner cut him off. This firm does not tolerate public outbursts, harassment of former spouses, or disrespect toward donors. Donors. Preston's stomach dropped. Crosswell Global reached out this morning, another partner added coldly. Ellington Cross personally expressed concern about your behavior. When a man like him raises a red flag, we listen. The floor felt like it tilted. He's exaggerating, Preston choked out. I didn't. This is all because Rowan showed up acting like... Enough, the managing partner snapped. Your personal choices are now professional liabilities, and investors are already pulling out of next quarter's project due to instability in leadership. Instability. Leadership. Words Preston used to weaponize against Rowan now sliced into him with surgical precision. We're placing you on immediate leave, the partner continued. Security will escort you to collect your things. Security? Escort? That's absurd, Preston barked, voice cracking. I'm the reason half the clients are even here. Not anymore, the partner replied simply. And just like that, it was over. 2 guards approached. Preston staggered back. This is because of her, he hissed. Rowan did this. But even he didn't believe it, because Rowan hadn't done anything except stand tall and tell the truth. As he was led past his co-workers, whispers followed him like ashes carried by the wind. Crosswell blacklisted him. He yelled at his ex-wife in public. I heard his girlfriend dumped him. Yes, Leela had already sent a text. We're done. Don't contact me. Outside, the cold slapped him across the face. His world built on ego, lies, and borrowed prestige cracked apart in less than 12 hours. And the man who once believed he stood above everyone now had nothing. Rowan Ellis woke the next morning to a quiet she didn't dread. Sunlight slipped between her curtains, warming the room with a softness she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since the divorce, she didn't carry the weight of surviving. She simply existed. And it felt extraordinary. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dozens of messages, mostly from coworkers who'd heard fragments of what happened at the gala. Proud of you? You handled yourself beautifully. Did Ellington Cross really defend you? Rowan smiled, shaking her head. The whirlwind from last night already felt surreal, like watching someone else's victory. But the peace in her chest reminded her it was hers. She brewed a small pot of coffee, savoring the scent. No rushing, no anxiety, no Preston's voice criticizing her morning routine, just silence and choice. On the kitchen table sat the ivory envelope again. She touched it gently, letting the truth settle. Her grandmother had seen her future, long before Rowan even imagined having one. A Fifth Avenue residence. Trusts, stability, freedom. With coffee in hand, Rowan curled up in her favorite corner with a book she'd neglected for months, Atomic Habits. She'd picked it up once while trying to hold her life together, only to be told by Preston that self-help books are for people with no real problems. Today, the words felt like guidance instead of shame. Every small change matters. Every quiet step is still movement. She breathed deeper. Around noon, her best friend Tessa showed up, arms full of groceries. "You need real food," she declared. "Healing requires protein. Thank you for watching." Rowan laughed, an easy, unguarded laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. "I'm okay, Tess." "You're better than okay," Tessa corrected, unpacking fruit. "You stood up to that man in front of half of Manhattan. I wish I'd seen his face." Rowan blushed. "I didn't stand up. I just finally stopped shrinking. That's exactly what standing up looks like." As they talked, Rowan noticed a bouquet on her doorstep, white lilies and winter roses, arranged with elegant restraint. A handwritten note rested inside. "For the strength you rediscovered, SC.Z." Her breath hitched soft, warm, hopeful. Not pressure. Not possession. Just acknowledgement. "Is that from who I think it's from?" Tessa teased. Rowan pressed the note to her chest. "It's kind, that's all." But she couldn't deny the truth beneath her words. For the first time, kindness didn't feel like a trick. It felt like the beginning of something she finally deserved. The next morning, Fifth Avenue shimmered beneath the pale winter sun as Rowan Ellis stepped out of a cab, the Cartier ring glinting subtly on her finger. The building in front of her, her grandmother's former residence, stood tall and dignified, a quiet monument of legacy and love. She took a breath, steadying herself before entering the lobby where her grandmother's attorneys waited. Inside, polished marble floors, velvet chairs, and sweeping chandeliers framed a room that felt surreal. The lead attorney, Mr. Alden, rose when she approached. "Miss Ellis," he greeted warmly, "your grandmother entrusted this estate to you with great intention." Rowan's throat tightened. "I wish she'd told me." "She believed you'd find strength when the time was right," he replied, "and that you'd step into a life that matched it." He explained the details: trust funds, the residence, philanthropic provisions Eleanor hoped Rowan would one day lead. It was overwhelming, but not frightening. For once, Rowan wasn't surviving the moment, she was shaping what came next. When the meeting ended, Rowan walked out onto Fifth Avenue, feeling the weight of the world shift from her shoulders to her hands, not as burden, but as possibility. A familiar voice called her name. Ellington Cross stood near the entrance, hands in the pockets of his tailored coat, watching her with quiet warmth. "How did it go?" he asked. Rowan approached him, a soft smile touching her lips. "My grandmother left me more than I ever imagined. A home, resources, a future." Ellington nodded. "She knew your worth long before the world caught up." Rowan exhaled, emotions stirring. "Ellington, thank you for standing with me, for believing in me before I believed in myself." He shook his head gently. "You give me too much credit. You did all the hard parts. I just reminded you of your strength." They walked side by side down the sidewalk, the winter wind brushing against them. After a moment, Ellington paused. "Rowan," he said softly, "I don't want to overstep, but I care for you, deeply. And if you ever choose to let someone into your new life, I would be honored to be that person." Her breath caught warm, steady, hopeful. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink. Instead, she reached for his hand. "I'd like that," she said, "very much." He smiled a rare, unguarded smile, and Rowan felt something settle inside her, something strong and whole. Behind her lay a past that no longer owned her. Before her stretched a future built on dignity, choice, and love she deserved. Rowan Ellis did not simply walk into the light. She finally walked as someone who knew she belonged there.